You don't expect the quiet moments to change your life. You think it'll be some loud explosion, yelling, tears, some dramatic scene out of a movie. But mine started on an ordinary Tuesday with nothing more than a forgotten laptop and a too smooth excuse. It was just before 9 a.m. when I realized I'd left the damn thing on the kitchen counter. I was already 2 exits past our neighborhood, halfway through my mental checklist for the workday, when I reached over and felt nothing on the passenger seat but my thermos and an unopened pack of gum. I swore under my breath. Brief debate, power through the day from my phone like a caveman or turn back. The presentation I had to finish for tomorrow made the decision easy. U-turn. 10 minutes later, I was back in front of our house, juggling my keys and coffee, wondering if I could still beat traffic. The first thing? Monica's car was still in the driveway. That gave me pause. She usually left by 8:15 on the dot. Tuesdays were her busiest. Regional strategy meetings at the bank, sometimes lunch with a board member or a potential partner. Occasionally she'd head straight to another branch in the next town over. Point is, Monica wasn't home at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays. Ever. I told myself maybe she was feeling sick. Maybe she had a late start or a canceled meeting. I didn't knock or call out. Just walked in, thinking I'd be quiet, grab my laptop, and bounce. But the house was still. Like it gets right after a thunderstorm when all the birds are quiet and the wind hasn't picked up yet. I took a step inside. Then another. That's when I heard the faint sound of movement upstairs, soft footsteps across the bedroom floor. Then the creak of the bathroom door. I hesitated, hand on the edge of the kitchen counter where my laptop waited like it had been placed there on purpose. And that's when I saw it. A cream-colored envelope, face up on the hardwood floor near the door. At first, I thought it might have fallen from the mail pile, except the wax seal, the slightly textured paper, and the cursive name across the front made it obvious this wasn't junk mail. It was addressed to someone named Lance Del Rey. I didn't recognize the name, but I did recognize the handwriting. I'd seen it scribbled on sticky notes, birthday cards, grocery lists. No one's G curled like Monica's. No one looped their L like that either. My wife had neat, elegant handwriting, equal parts practiced and personal. The kind that doesn't just happen. It's made. And it was hers. No question. Before I could even process it, I heard her voice from upstairs. Light and breezy, like nothing in the world was off. "Caleb?" She sounded surprised, but not alarmed. "What are you doing back?" she asked, coming into view at the top of the staircase. She was still in her robe. Not a casual one either, but the silky one, dark blue, almost black, with the satin hem. She only wore that robe on slow weekend mornings or after late-night showers when she knew she wasn't leaving the house. She blinked down at me, her hair undone, skin bare of makeup. "Did something happen?" "Forgot my laptop," I said, holding it up. "Didn't get far before I realized." She laughed softly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Well, lucky for you I'm home, huh?" I looked back toward the envelope, still there on the floor. She followed my gaze, and her posture shifted just slightly. She descended the stairs, and as she neared the entryway, she moved quickly, bending to scoop up the letter in one fluid motion. "That? Just something for work," she said without me asking. "We're sending out gala invitations. Some VIP thing." I was writing notes for a few of the clients. "Lance Del Rey a client?" I asked casually. She looked up, then offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh yeah. He's new. Private investor. I think he owns some stake in one of our smaller branches." I nodded, not sure why I felt the need to keep standing there like a detective waiting to pounce. Her story wasn't unbelievable, but it was too clean, too rehearsed. She walked past me toward the kitchen, setting the envelope on the counter next to the bowl of fruit. "You hungry?" she asked, opening the fridge. "I was just thinking of making something before heading out. Do you want eggs? Toast? Thought you had a meeting at 9. Her hand froze on the milk carton for a second, and then she said it got pushed. "Everyone's remote this morning, so I figured I'd work from here until noon." "Got it." I waited, still standing in the same spot, still staring at the envelope. She closed the fridge, smiled again, and kissed my cheek on the way back toward the stairs. "I'll change and start the day for real." I watched her go. She didn't ask me how work was. Didn't ask what I was working on. Monica usually pried into those things half out of habit, half out of actual curiosity. But today it was like I'd interrupted a scene that wasn't meant for me. After she went back upstairs, I reached out and touched the envelope. My fingers hovered over the flap. I didn't open it. Didn't dare. But I stared at the name again. Lance Del Rey. I'd never heard her mention him before. Not once. Not in passing. Not even when she did her usual after-work info dumps when she'd talk about frustrating meetings, office politics, who wore what and who got credit for someone else's work. Her office stories were never short. And yet Lance had never come up. I put my laptop in my bag, forced myself to leave, and drove to work in a fog. All morning I couldn't shake it. Not the letter. Not even the name. What stayed with me was how easily she explained it. Like it was already sitting on the tip of her tongue, waiting for a prompt. That's what got me. Not the rope. Not the delay. Not even the mystery man's name. It was her answer. Too quick. Too perfect. Too easy. And deep down I knew, maybe not what, not who, not how, but I knew something had changed. Something in her home. Something in Monica. And something in me. You ever notice how once something breaks your sense of normal, you start seeing the cracks everywhere? That's what happened after I found the letter. Or maybe not found, caught is more accurate. Caught it lying there, exposed like a loose thread on a sweater, the kind that unravels the whole damn thing once you tug. And tug I did, even if I didn't realize it at first. The rest of that day, I kept trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But when I got home, Monica was back to herself, wearing her usual work clothes, hair done, cool and composed. She smiled like she had in 1,000 evenings before. Asked me about dinner. Made a crack about how we needed to upgrade our dishwasher, which had started making a wheezing sound halfway through every cycle. It was normal, but not quite. And once the feeling sunk in, it never left. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. Her breathing was steady, lips slightly parted, hands folded over her stomach like she was completely at peace. I wasn't. Instead, I kept thinking back through the last few months, replaying little moments I'd ignored or explained away. It started with the perfume. Back in February, she brought home a new bottle, Chanel, I think. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. But it was a scent she used to say gave her a headache. Now she wore it nearly every day. Said it made her feel more grown up. But that was odd. Monica already commanded attention without needing designer cologne. Then there were the calls. She started taking them in other rooms. Not just work calls. I'd walk in and she'd quietly step out, murmuring something about back-to-back meetings or client confidentiality. I didn't press. She was in management, I told myself. Maybe this was just part of the role. And her work trips. Those started getting longer. At first, she'd just be gone for the day, meeting someone for lunch, a couple of hours at a satellite office. Then it became overnight stays. Once, she told me she had a training conference out of town, but when I offered to drive her to the station, she waved it off. I'll Uber, it's just easier, she said. That struck me as strange. We'd always driven each other to the airport even if it meant waking up at 5 a.m. Somehow now, she preferred to go it alone. But the thing that stuck with me most? The burn mark. It showed up on her collarbone one Thursday night. I saw it as she undressed, a red half-circle welt barely visible under her blouse. I remember pointing it out, concerned, and she brushed it off. Curling iron, she said, not even looking down. I was rushing this morning. Except Monica hadn't curled her hair herself since 2019. I knew that because we used to joke about how bad she was at it. She always went to her stylist or used those big Velcro rollers on Sundays. I didn't say anything that night. Maybe I should have. Instead, I kissed her goodnight, a little more distantly than usual. But now, in the soft dark of our bedroom, with the weight of that envelope still fresh in my mind, all those moments rearranged themselves like puzzle pieces that had been scattered under the couch. Each one suddenly fit. There was also that night last month, something I'd nearly forgotten. I had gotten up to use the bathroom around midnight and heard her in the hallway. Not walking. Crying. Not sobbing loudly, but that kind of silent cry you don't want anyone to hear. When I asked if she was okay, she pulled it together instantly. Oh, just an article, she said with a laugh that cracked halfway through. One of those animal rescue things. You know how emotional I get. I believed her. But I shouldn't have. Now, those tears seemed like something else entirely. Grief. Guilt. Or maybe the panic of living two lives and feeling one start to bleed into the other. The more I looked, the more I saw. She started keeping her phone face down. Not always, not blatantly, but often enough. She used to be indifferent about it, left it lying anywhere. On the counter. The dresser. Now it was always nearby. Always locked. Once, I tried to check our shared calendar. She had invited me to a Google Sheet to help manage our schedules. But I noticed she hadn't updated it in weeks. Things she'd mentioned, dinners, meetings, even the supposed team retreat, weren't listed anywhere. I chalked it up to being busy. But now it just felt calculated. Then came the Sunday lunch. We were out with her sister's family, sitting on the patio of some overpriced Italian place, and her phone buzzed. She excused herself, walked a good 15 feet away, and answered it with her back to us. When she came back, she said it was a coworker needing help with a budget report. I didn't ask questions, but I remember her sister giving her a look. Not suspicious. Just surprised. Monica never used to work on Sundays. And the envelope. God, that damn envelope. Every time I thought maybe I was being dramatic, I'd see it in my mind again, Lance Del Rey scrawled in her unmistakable handwriting. Her reaction. The speed. The ease. The confidence. The kind you don't develop in a day. It's the kind you learn when you've had to lie before. I started Googling the name one night when she was in the shower. Lance Del Rey. It wasn't a common name, which helped. The first hit was a real estate developer out of Austin. Too old. The second was a jazz musician. Wrong region. Then I found a LinkedIn page, private investor, boutique firm based 2 cities over. Picture, early 40s, sharp suit, smile that looked a little too practiced. And there it was right in the bio. Board partner and private donor for Northeast Regional Bank. The same bank Monica worked at. Her employer. The connection wasn't solid, not yet. But it was enough. The man received invitations to charity galas. Monica's job involved client engagement and media strategy. That could explain it. But if it were that simple, why lie? Why not mention his name before? Why the sudden robe-wearing, the faux surprise at my return, the nervous energy she tried to mask with a kiss and a scrambled egg distraction? No, this wasn't professional. It was personal. I didn't say anything that week. I wasn't ready. I watched. Observed. Took notes like I was studying an unfamiliar animal waiting to understand the patterns. The silences between us grew longer, though neither of us said it out loud. She noticed, I think. Tried harder to engage. Wore the perfume more often. Cooked my favorite meal 2 nights in a row. Asked about my work like she used to, but it all felt like a cover-up. A performance. And I started feeling like an extra in a movie I used to co-star in. Truth was, the puzzle had already reassembled itself. I just hadn't admitted what picture it made. But I knew. God help me, I knew. I was married to someone who had something to hide. And I had no idea how deep it went. There's a kind of calm that settles in right before everything breaks. Not peace, more like a stillness before the floor gives out beneath your feet. That's where I was the night everything became real. The moment my suspicions weren't just ideas floating in my head, but facts I could see, hear, feel. And the worst part? I'd walked straight into it, thinking it was something else entirely. It started with a text from our mutual acquaintance, Alan, someone Monica and I both knew through the business circle. Not a close friend, but one of those well-connected guys who always seemed to be in the know. He'd invited me to what he called a VIP breakout session at a regional conference happening at the downtown convention center. Said it was a small thing, investors, entrepreneurs, a couple bank people, worth popping by for networking. I hesitated at first. I'd been keeping to myself more than usual lately, partly from work stress, mostly from walking on eggshells at home. But something about the way he phrased the invite caught my attention. Thought you might want to see some familiar faces, he texted. Should be interesting. At the time, I didn't read into it. I should have. I showed up wearing a navy blazer and my cleanest white shirt, the one with the crisp collar Monica used to compliment whenever I wore it. I hadn't worn it in weeks. The room was in a side wing of the building, tucked away from the main event, a roped-off lounge marked private access only. I gave my name to the attendant, who checked the list and waved me in. What I walked into wasn't a meeting. It was a scene. Low lights. Soft jazz music playing from a speaker somewhere near the back. Tables lined with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Velvet curtains drawn over tall windows. And in the center of the lounge, seated like they owned the place, were Monica and a man I immediately knew had to be him. Lance Del Rey. It was the same face I'd seen on LinkedIn, only more animated in real life, smiling, leaning back comfortably, one arm draped along the back of the couch. Monica was beside him, not across, beside, tucked in close, her hand resting on his chest like it belonged there. Her fingers were playing with the lapel of his suit jacket. Her posture was completely at ease. An asterisk mate. Familiar. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head tilted toward his, her expression lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. And in that moment I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was numb. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just stood there, frozen like I'd walked into the wrong scene of a play and couldn't find the exit. They hadn't seen me. I was still behind a potted plant near the entryway, partially shielded by a support column. My heart was pounding, but I barely felt it. I couldn't even tell you how long I stood there. Could have been a minute. Could have been 10. But I saw enough. At one point, Lance leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She giggled like a girl in high school and squeezed his hand. I watched her fingers interlace with his. And that was it. That was the confirmation. The final card turned over. No more doubt. No more maybe. No more putting the puzzle together. The picture was clear now. I turned quietly and slipped out of the lounge, retracing my steps back to the hallway. I didn't stop to greet anyone. Didn't say goodbye to Alan or anyone else I might have known. I walked past the exit signs and didn't look back. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove. No destination, just streets and highways and parking lots I barely registered. I ended up in a lakeside lot an hour out of town. K** led the engine. Sat there watching the water ripple under moonlight, replaying the scene over and over. Her hand. His chest. The laugh. The closeness. And worst of all, how relaxed she was. This wasn't new. That kind of ease doesn't come from flirting or recent tension. That comes from repetition. Familiarity. A rhythm. They had a rhythm. Which meant this had been going on for a while. I thought back to the burn mark. The curling iron lie. The perfume. The late meetings. The emotional detachment. The phone calls taken behind closed doors. Every single piece of it led here. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just confused. I was clear. She'd been having an affair. With a man connected to her job, her bank, her professional life, the very thing she'd spent the last 2 years pouring herself into. She didn't just lie. She didn't just cheat. She built a second life, brick by careful brick, while sharing a home with me. I wish I could say I cried. That I screamed or punched the steering wheel. I didn't. I just sat there, breathing in slow, shallow breaths like I was underwater. I felt heavy, like something had pressed down on my chest and wouldn't let up. When the sky started turning pale, I still hadn't moved. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Monica. 1 text. Hey, are you okay? Thought you'd be home by now. Let me know you're safe. Let me know I'm safe? From what, exactly? The irony made me almost laugh. But I didn't respond. I powered off the screen and sat there until the morning birds started calling. I drove back home around 6 while she was still asleep. Her car was in the driveway. The house was still. Quiet. Peaceful. Fake. I stood in the entryway watching the sunlight pour through the front window. That same window where the letter had once laid. Where Lance Del Rey's name stared back at me in Monica's perfect handwriting. The proof had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I climbed the stairs, not making a sound. The bedroom door was cracked. I could hear her light breathing, soft and steady. I watched for a second, just long enough to burn the image into my memory. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, wrapped in bedsheets, sleeping peacefully while the foundation of our life cracked underneath her. I didn't wake her. Didn't say a word. I turned, walked back down the stairs, and left again. Later that day, I emailed my assistant to clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Told her I'd be working remotely. Then I went to a hotel I'd used once during a renovation a couple years back. Small, modern, tucked off the main strip. I didn't go back home that night either. Or the next. I didn't need to. There was nothing to fight about. Nothing to confront. The truth wasn't just in her hands or his eyes or the way they moved together on that couch. It was in how sure she looked. How right they looked. She had already left me. Emotionally. Mentally. The Monica I'd known, the Monica I married, had been gone for a while. I just hadn't realized it. Now I did. And I would never forget. I think most people assume the next step after betrayal is a blow-up. A fight, a shouting match, tears and accusations. And part of me wanted that. Part of me wanted to come home, slam the door, and demand she explain every lie she told. But when I pictured the confrontation, all I could see was her face. Her cool, practiced expression. Her ability to spin things just enough to make you question what you know. I didn't want a performance. I wanted clarity, and I already had it. So I chose silence. Not because I was afraid, because I was done wasting breath. When I checked back into the hotel for a second week, I left no note, no message, just an absence. A gap she couldn't fill with a text or a voicemail. Monica tried, of course. The first few days, the calls came in steady rhythm. Then came the messages, short, neutral, clearly written with one eye on optics. I ignored them all. Instead, I got to work. I've always kept my personal life and financial life separate. It was something I learned early on, watching a friend's divorce turn into a bloodbath. That separation had started as protection. Now it was a we**p**n. Most people didn't know this, but I'm a silent stakeholder in the bank Monica works for. One of the biggest, in fact. I made my move during the 2020 panic, saw the writing on the wall when no one else did. Back then, the bank was bleeding capital. I stepped in through a private equity group, bailed them out anonymously, saved their expansion, kept their mergers intact, and remained quietly in the background while Monica climbed the ranks. She never asked where the surge of funding came from. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she was too busy chasing her own success story to realize part of her ascent was built on my capital. Now I was pulling it back. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. My first call was to Julian, my financial advisor of 10 years and someone who, like me, preferred discretion over drama. I gave him clear instructions. I want to begin divesting, I said. Quietly, piece by piece. I want you to sell the shares through 2 firms under separate names. Space it out. Keep me off the radar. There was a pause. Everything all right? He asked. Just cleaning house. He didn't press further. That's why I hired him. Over the next few weeks, I watched from the sidelines as my silent influence began to retract. It wouldn't shake the bank overnight, but it would create ripples. Monica had built her image on being a modern, innovative leader who brought in outside capital. Once people started asking where that capital came from, and more importantly where it was going, the questions would multiply, and I wasn't stopping there. During the pandemic, I'd also worked with a business magazine on a feature about the survival of mid-sized banks. The story never ran. The editor shelved it at the last minute when bigger national stories broke. But I still had the draft. In it, an anonymous investor, the one who helped keep Northeast Regional afloat, was mentioned. Back then, I didn't care about being named. Now I did. I reached out to the editor, told her I wanted to resurrect the piece with updates, offered a new interview on the record this time. The story wasn't about bitterness or betrayal. It was about legacy, stability, the kind of leadership that didn't need a title or a LinkedIn post to make an impact. She was intrigued. I remember this, she said. It's rare someone like you speaks up. Yeah, I said. Well, some things deserve to be remembered. By the time the article hit their online issue, it had a new title, The Invisible Architect: How One Investor Saved a Regional Bank from Collapse. It didn't name Monica directly, but the dots were easy to connect, especially for anyone who worked at the bank. Especially for anyone who had been watching the sudden rise of a marketing executive whose numbers always seemed to align just a little too perfectly. I didn't say anything to Monica, didn't gloat, didn't warn her. I let the story speak for itself. She called the day it was published. Twice. I let both go to voicemail. Then came the email. We need to talk. Please. That word, please, that was new. I didn't respond. It wasn't about playing games. It was about preserving my oxygen. I didn't owe her more time, more patience, more conversation. She'd already had months of those. What I was giving her now was space. Not the kind she used as an excuse when she was sneaking away to be with him. Real space. The kind you can't close with a text. While Monica was scrambling to preserve her version of the narrative, I turned inward. I started shifting funds to a new project. Something completely outside her world. I'd quietly acquired an old music venue downtown with plans to turn it into a non-profit studio and mentorship hub for young artists. It was an idea I'd shelved for years, telling myself I didn't have the time. But now time was all I had. The process felt clean, purposeful. Every contract I signed, every renovation I approved, reminded me I was still capable of building something worthwhile. Something real. Something that couldn't be touched by secrets or side glances in a VIP lounge. Friends began reaching out. Some had read the article. Some had just noticed I'd dropped off the radar. I kept my answers brief. Not one word about Monica. No shade. No sob story. Just, life shifts. I'm pivoting. They respected that. Monica, though, she wasn't built for silence. The longer I stayed quiet, the more scattered her messages became. The tone shifted from calm to concerned to frantic. By the end of week 3, she left a voicemail in the middle of the night. Caleb, I don't know what's going on. If you're done, just say it. But please don't do this thing where you disappear. We've built too much. You matter too much. Just talk to me. She sounded raw. Not rehearsed. Not polished. But it was too late for tone. She didn't get to narrate this part of the story. I'd spent years watching her command attention. On panels, in interviews, at fundraisers. Always poised. Always the hero of her own narrative. And for a while, I believed in that version of her. The polished strategist. The visionary. The partner. But people can only live in the spotlight for so long before it starts to show what's underneath. That's why I stayed silent. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying to stop being a character in her script. She'd already written me out the moment she stepped into that room with Lance. What I was doing now was writing my own story. And for the first time in a long time, the pen was back in my hand. The invitation arrived in a matte black envelope with gold-foiled lettering, classic Monica style. Everything about it screamed exclusivity. Inside, a thick card announced the event. Northeast Regional Bank Gala Celebration. Expansion and Excellence. A night of recognition. Awards. Champagne. Speeches. The kind of event Monica used to dream about planning. Now she was the star of it. I wasn't supposed to be there. At least not in her version of things. Not after weeks of radio silence. Not after the article. But they'd sent me an invite anyway. Likely out of obligation, maybe even oversight. Or maybe someone on the board still remembered who signed the check that saved them. I RSVP'd yes. Didn't tell anyone. Not my assistant, not friends, not Monica. If she was going to wear a mask in front of the city, I wanted to see it for myself. The gala was held at the Old Conservatory, a historic glass-paneled venue downtown that had been converted into an event space. Chandeliers floated like stars in the rafters, and a jazz quartet played near the entrance, smoothing over the buzz of conversation. People were dressed to the nines. Judges, lobbyists, business heads, influencers in shimmering dresses, politicians shaking hands like campaign season never ended. I walked in wearing a black suit. Not a rental. Custom, tailored. I wasn't there to make noise. I was there to be undeniable. The moment I stepped in, I saw her. Monica stood near the podium, laughing politely with the bank's regional president. She looked the part, sleek black gown, diamond studs, hair pinned in the kind of elegant updo she usually reserved for investor dinners. Her hand rested lightly on the arm of the man beside her. Lance Del Rey. There he was. Same smirk, same perfectly practiced posture. I stood across the room, unseen for a while, watching them play out their performance. She leaned into him like a woman at ease with the life she'd chosen. He looked smug. Too smug, as if he'd gotten away with something. And maybe he thought he had. But the room was shifting. I saw the first flicker of discomfort when Monica turned toward the stage and her eyes met mine. Her smile faltered only for a second, but it was enough. She hadn't expected me to come. And she definitely hadn't expected me to be invited on stage. It started when the board chair took the microphone. He went through the usual thanks to donors, growth milestones, yada yada. Then he paused, cleared his throat. Before we move forward, he said, there's someone we'd like to acknowledge. A person whose support was vital to the survival of this institution during the most uncertain economic period in recent history. A person whose investment came anonymously, but whose impact has been felt in every corner of our operations. I saw Monica stiffen. Lance blinked, confused, curious. The board chair continued. I'm referring, of course, to Caleb Brooks. The room turned. Chairs swiveled. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. For a beat, it was just air and silence. Someone started clapping. One of the analysts I vaguely remembered from a prior board call. Then another. Then the whole room. Slow, unsure at first. Then steady. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I walked to the stage. Every step I took toward that microphone was its own kind of justice. I wasn't flashy about it. No flourish. No drama. Just presence. I stood next to the chair, took the offered mic, and said, thank you. It's been an honor to support something I believed in. Something that deserved another chance. I didn't look at Monica. I didn't have to. The crowd was already looking at her. Some in admiration. Some in confusion. Some those who connected the dots in suspicion. I handed the mic back and stepped down. And in that moment, everything changed. The applause ended. The music picked back up awkwardly. People tried to return to their conversations, but the energy in the room had shifted. It was subtle. But in rooms like this, subtle matters. Whispers started. Some leaned into each other, eyebrows raised. I caught snippets. That's Monica's husband, right? I thought he was just a consultant. No, that's the investor? Monica looked like she'd swallowed glass. Her hands were clasped a little too tightly in front of her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Lance said something to her softly, quickly, but she didn't respond. She was scanning the room, trying to read the air. But the air had turned thick. Heavy. A few people approached me. Shook my hand. Thanked me for keeping the lights on. Asked if I'd consider working with them directly. I gave polite answers. I wasn't here to make business moves. I was here to let the truth stand. It didn't need to yell. It just needed to exist. Eventually, Monica approached me. Alone. Her heels tapped across the marble like a slow metronome, echoing louder in my chest than I expected. Caleb, she said, low, tight. I didn't know you were coming. I wasn't sure either, I replied. She searched my face. Probably looking for emotion. Weakness. Anything she could pull at. But I had nothing left to give. I would have introduced you, she added. Would you? I asked, eyebrows raised. A long pause. Then she said, we should talk. I gave a slight nod toward the open floor. You're busy. Go enjoy the party. Before she could say more, someone called her name, another board member, trying to keep things moving. She hesitated, then turned and left, her posture tighter than before. I stood by the bar, drink in hand, and watched as she floated from conversation to conversation, smile slightly cracked. Lance drifted to the side, away from her, talking to another executive. I noticed the distance. So did others. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't even about the affair. It was about the image she had built, curated, controlled, and how quickly it could fracture with the wrong light shining on it. And now the cracks were showing. She wasn't the unshakable success story. She was someone who had help. And someone who had secrets. I left before the end of the night. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't wait for speeches or awards. I'd said everything I needed to without opening my mouth. And the room heard it. After the gala, Monica didn't reach out again right away. Not that week. Not the one after. I think she sensed the shift. Not just in me, but in the room that night. She'd spent years building a persona. But all it took was a few words and my presence to undo the illusion. By week's end, the bank issued a vague press release, pending a leadership restructure to reflect evolving organizational needs. It didn't name her. It didn't have to. Lance? He ghosted her. Word got around that he'd quietly moved out of their shared condo. I heard through a mutual contact that he was reevaluating optics. Translation, he'd bet on Monica's image and jumped ship when the shine wore off. He even released a statement to the press, nothing dramatic, just distancing language. I wish Monica continued success and clarity in her journey. Cold, clinical, and calculated. Just like them, the board knew the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Clients began pulling out. A few big accounts were quietly redirected to smaller firms. Some of those firms, incidentally, had quiet ties to me. I never asked them to move. But people pay attention when the curtain drops. And Monica? She started fading. Not in public, but in the spaces that mattered. Fewer calls. Fewer mentions. Fewer invitations.